Are you aging strong? On episode 712 of the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast, we meet Jacqueline Hooton and discuss her book, Strong, the definitive guide to active aging. Welcome to the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast, the largest and longest running health and fitness podcast dedicated to people over 40. Whether you're looking to lose weight, get stronger, or improve your health and age better, this podcast is for you. I'm your host, Coach Allan, an online health and fitness coach and author of the Wellness Roadmap. Each week, we dive into practical tips, expert advice, and inspiring stories to help you take control of your health and fitness. If you're ready to look, feel, and perform your best, no matter your age, this podcast is the perfect place to start. Let's get you on the path to a healthier, fitter, and more energetic version of yourself. I hope you'll join us each week, and together we can unlock your full potential. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast. I'm really glad you're here. Today we're talking about one of my favorite topics, strength training. So I know I'm going to enjoy this, and I think you will too. Jacqueline's pretty cool. This is a really good episode, so stay tuned. I was talking to another trainer who also works with people over 40 the other day, and she asked me, Allan, why are you doing so much to help me? Don't you know we're after the same people? We're competitors. I couldn't help but chuckle. Of course, this confused her, so I told her this. My competition is not other trainers. My competition for people is to do nothing, to keep putting it off. And I really do believe that. I think that if you're choosing my competition, that's okay. I want you to get healthy and fit. And if you need help, I want you to get it. But if you're putting it off, are you procrastinating? Do you feel stuck? Are you just not doing anything? I mean, that's the competition. That's what I'm facing. And that's what I want to fix. Now, I'm opening up spots in my 12-week one-on-one online coaching program. This is your opportunity to work directly with me to finally build the strength, energy, and health you've been wanting. And here's the thing that's a little different. I guarantee results. This is the only launch for my one-on-one coaching for this program for the remainder of the year. So if you want to go into 2026 lighter, stronger, healthier, with more energy, you have to act now. But I want to make this even better. So I'm adding 3 huge bonuses, okay? I'm adding 2 extra weeks of coaching. So it's a 14-week total for the 12-week program. 2 extra weeks, plus I'm adding 2 freeze weeks. Now, freeze week is when life happens. So maybe you have a vacation plan. You're like, no, I'm going to put it off because I don't want to lose that week. You can freeze that week and we'll add it to the end. Maybe you get sick, and I don't want you training. I don't want you worrying about your nutrition when you're sick. I want you getting healthy. That's mission number 1. So let's just freeze that week and we'll pick it up at the end. So you don't lose the time. You get 2 freeze weeks. And then finally, and this is the one that has the limiting on me because I just can't give enough of these. I can't give these away, too many of these away, but it's a 45-minute live strength workout with me on Zoom. So yes, I'm going to help you with writing your program, get everything going. And then yes, I'm going to get live on Zoom when you're in the gym, or in your home or wherever you train. And I'm going to watch you train. And then I'm going to give you the coaching cues that I would give if I were right there coaching you in person. So you'll do the exercises safely, you'll do them effectively. And as I tell people, the only thing I won't be able to do in that moment is load and unload plates. And I'm also not going to count your reps. I'm going to focus on your form and give you the coaching cues you need to do the work right. So there's 3 huge bonuses that make this the perfect time to do it if you've been putting it off. But this is going to be the only chance you get to start working with me for live one-on-one coaching. This is one-on-one coaching. This is intense stuff. This is me getting you there, guaranteed. Now, my spots are limited, and this is just a launch window. And this is the last week for it. So as this goes live, there's only a few more days to set up your discovery call. So I encourage you to go to 40plusfitness.com/launch and book that call today. If you're ready to stop watching from the sidelines and step into it, get yourself where you need to be. Can you imagine what going into 2026 is going to feel like if you start making the change today? Go to 40plusfitness.com/launch. And this page is only going to be active until Saturday. So you need to get out there today, book your call, 40plusfitness.com/launch. Our guest today is a personal trainer and fitness tutor with over 20 years of experience. As a woman who looks at aging as a challenge to embrace, she has competed in marathons and bodybuilding all during midlife. She runs a popular Instagram page, Her Garden Gym, where she shares fitness tips and exercises for the over 50s. With no further ado, here's Jacqueline Hooten. Jacqueline, welcome to 40 Plus Fitness.
Thank you.
So the name of your book is called Strong, The Definitive Guide to Active Aging. And I love that the book is called Strong because I think, and while we're going to talk a lot about the different training and things that people need to be focused on to make sure that they have the whole fitness put together, I think this is probably the one area where women and men want to feel strong when they get older, but we're getting weaker. And if we don't do something about it, we're not going to age the way we want to.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I like that title because I think it really speaks to what we're trying to accomplish, you and I as trainers, is to get people where they can feel and look younger and able to do things that they didn't necessarily believe that they could do when we all thought about what life was going to be like when we got older. You know, most of us thought we weren't even going to exist after the age of 40, right? We were going to go out in like a flame of glory. It didn't quite work that way. So now we got to deal with the second half of life.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And to me, it's not about looking younger, although that, this is a whole sort of bone of contention of mine, to be honest. So I really want to focus on how we perform, how we feel, how we function, and get away from the idea that, I understand people have aesthetic training goals, but I feel like we've oversold fitness in terms of aesthetics and we've not made enough about the health benefits. And for me, as we get older, that is so important and ultimately impacts the quality of our life.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. In fact, that's kind of a direction I'm moving as well as I start to go into my 60s, is to be thinking in those terms, because I'm not going to be pretty anymore, if I ever was. But
we are redefining what pretty means. Pretty strong, yes. pretty fast, pretty explosive.
Well, pretty happy.
That'll do.
Full of joy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That'll do.
It's just, and it's kind of the interesting thing because when I first started fitness and health training just over 10 years ago, I did not want to say weight loss. I did not want to use the term weight loss because I, number one, hate that term because we don't want to lose weight. We want to lose fat. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to just say fat loss, but unfortunately, that's not what people are. Well, that's what they want, but it's not what they want to hear. They know the word and so a lot of times we kind of almost have to, not for a bad way, but to sell them what they want and give them what they need.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think, I saw something the other day about, you shouldn't be talking to, when people talk to you about toning, that's not what they don't mean toning. Toning doesn't mean anything. And I think we have to meet clients where they're at. We have to use language that they understand. Educate in the process, but I don't think we need to patronize people. People say weight loss. We know that they mean fat loss, don't we? And if we say, oh, no, you don't mean weight loss. You mean, there's a way to educate, isn't there, without being high and mighty about the terminology. It's not correct.
Yeah, I was a little high and mighty early on. I said, well, if you want to lose 11 pounds today, I can tell you how. You just cut off your head. I also had a quip where I'd sit there and say, if you want to change your BMI today, you can just cut off your left leg.
Yeah.
You're just as tall and you weigh a lot less.
Yeah.
And because those are numbers that people are looking at on the scale or calculating. And I'm like, in the grand scheme of things, that's not really changing your life. You want to be improving your health. You want to be improving your fitness, and you want to be adding more joy into your life, which means that you're healthy and able to do the things you want to do. And so you're not missing out on things that you should be there for. And particularly as we get older now, as I just became a grandparent. And
congratulations. That's adding joy, isn't it?
It is. But, you start doing math. I'm almost 60 years older than Cruz. His name's Cruz.
Lovely.
And so as I'm thinking about him, like almost 60 years older, we used to have kids in our 20s. And then we were done, it was like 20s. And so grandparents were 40, maybe 50 years older than their grandkids. And then great grandparents were 60 to 70 years, 80 years older. Now there's these huge skips. Before Cruz ever gets married, if they get married in their 30s now, I'm going to be in my 90s. And quite frankly, I want to be there.
Yeah, absolutely. That's how I feel.
I want to be able to get on a plane and travel and be there and enjoy the event. I want to be there. And so to be there means that I have to be taking care of myself today.
Yeah.
And for the next 30 some odd years.
Exactly. And I don't know what, the health situation is where you are, but in the UK, well, I know something of the situation, but, we do not have enough young people who will be in the caring profession. There's going to be nobody who can care for us in our older age. We need to address what we need to address younger now so that we can live well, and we don't need the sort of support that previous generations have needed. We're living longer, but we need to live longer better.
I completely agree, which is why I did want to talk about the long game, because it's kind of something that you kind of touched on several times throughout the book, was that this is not just a project, it's get fit and you're done.
Yeah.
This is something we build and we continue to refine over the course of our lives, because we're going to have those setbacks. We're going to get older. And as a result, it's going to change things for us, some for the better. Getting older can be better in many, many ways, but some things actually not for the better. And so it's really building a life around what is possible for you today with a kind of a broader view of what tomorrow could look like.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in the book, you talked about something, and I thought I love this term when you said it, but it's about setting boundaries. And initially I thought, okay, yeah, women definitely deal with this problem a lot, but I realized for a big portion of my life, I dealt with boundary problems myself. But you actually called it, and I love this, maybe it's not, probably it's more of a common term there, but you called it ring fencing time.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about what that concept means for you?
Well, I think, as you say, it's very much, I can only talk from the female perspective because that's my life experience. But I think, we can end up being at everybody's beck and call, especially if we're a parent, mother, we've got older relatives, we've got jobs, we've got partners. We can end up being pulled in every direction. I'm sure that's true for guys as well. And so we're often the last priority. In my book, I talk about women ring fencing their time so they've got time to exercise, because obviously this is a common barrier to exercise. We hear people say that they don't have the time, but actually recognizing that your time is precious and making that time, and then nothing interrupts that time. Nothing. Obviously, we could all have an emergency. My parents are getting older. We've had emergencies with my parents. So I'm not talking about emergencies, but I'm just talking about, someone says, oh, but could you not do it then? And could you do that instead? And could you do that? And before we know where we are, we've got no boundaries at all. Our own health is suffering because we've not prioritized ourselves. And I think so many women suffer from this guilt that if they're not doing the things that they think they should be doing for everyone, that they feel guilty. And I'm like, you need to put yourself first, because, as you get older, you are the person living in that body. You are the person who is going to have to deal with your body. Doesn't matter what support you've got around you, but ultimately you're going to be living that life. So I think that's where the boundaries come in, and it's recognizing what's important to you And, some people will be uncomfortable about this, first of all. If you're pushing back a bit, they're used to you doing everything and putting yourself last. And it sounds so selfish. And I think this is the other thing we've kind of got to overcome. You have to be a little bit selfish when it comes to your health and well-being. You simply have to be. Because ultimately, everyone else, society is going to suffer if you're not. Your family are going to suffer if you're not. I don't want my children to be my carers. I don't want to be a drain on resources as well as living the life that I want to live. So I think I owe it to myself. I owe it to my family. I owe it to wider society to look after myself. And part of that means setting these boundaries, not being unkind, but just setting these boundaries. If I get an emergency call from my parents tonight and something has happened, of course I'm going to be there. But all the other pulls and pushes on your time, I think that's where the boundaries come in, and recognizing what's important to you and therefore what can go by the wayside and what can, when it comes to priorities, what's a little bit lower down.
Yeah. When I was in corporate when I started trying to turn my health around, and I realized, okay, if I'm going to get my workout in, the best time for me to do that would be during my lunch hour. But obviously, if my lunch hour is the same lunch hour as everybody else's, I'm not going to be able to get on the equipment and get an efficient workout done. So if I really want to get the workout done, the best time for me to do it is at about 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock. Just a bunch of retired people, maybe some students, and I can get my workout done. And so that's what I did. I told my boss, I'm like, okay, from 2 to 3, I'm taking my lunch hour and I'm going to do this. Now, I was working 16 to 18-hour days.
Goodness.
And so I had every excuse to say, well, I can't do this. There's not enough time. And I would be obviously exhausted at the end of the day. And I'm starting my day so early in the morning because I've got people in Europe and Asia that I have to catch up with before they finish their work days. And so I'm getting up really early in the morning to start my work day to kind of make sure everything keeps moving forward. And so 2 to 3, and invariably, funny, my boss would call me like sometimes right at 2 o'clock. And I remember one time he called and I had just changed into my gym clothes. And I was like, no, I'm not going to change back just to go up to main C-suite. So I go up there and I'm bounding through C-suite in my sneakers and shorts and t-shirt. And I walk into his office and he's like, what is this? And I said, well, remember, 2 to 3 is my lunch hour. I'm going to the gym. He's like, oh, he said, well, I need you to do this. And he started telling me what he wants. I said, do you need it before 4 o'clock? And he said, no. I said, okay, you'll have it at 4. Now, previous me would have went back down, changed back into my clothes, did the project, sent it to him, and it wouldn't have made a big difference if he got it at 3 or if he got it at 4. But I would have missed the workout. So it was setting those boundaries and saying, no one's hurt by me asking the question.
Yeah.
You didn't have to have it. And I think a lot of times we overemphasize how important getting something done now really is when we don't prioritize ourselves enough, and setting those boundaries it is very hard. Telling my boss, I'm sorry, but I'm going to the gym.
Yeah, I mean that's a classic example, isn't it? And it's hard, isn't it? It's hard to set those boundaries sometimes, but it just goes to show how you will always be lower on everybody else's priority. You will be lower, so you have to put yourself higher, because to everybody else you are not on their list of priorities. So we owe it to ourselves, and it's quite hard to do that. Well done, you.
Well, and you mentioned something in the book that I thought was really important, and why these boundaries are so important and why you really need to pay attention to them is we are a generation now based on the demographics between children, grandchildren, and parents and all that. And so our parents are getting sick and older. We have to take care of them. And we still have younger kids in some cases, and we have to take care of them. And of course, then our spouse and ourselves, our home, and many times a job or business. And so as we're doing all these things, what I like to think about is, okay, well, what if I was my parent? Do I want my children to have to deal with me being unhealthy?
Yeah.
And having, so when you talk about emergencies, like having them all the time because I'm not fit, I'm not capable, I'm falling all the time. And there's, all this stuff. And they're like, now they're troubled with, do we put them in a home? Do we do these other things? I went to Puerto Vallarta and there was an earthquake. And short story was I drive up, we get up in the Uber and the earthquake had just finished. They had everybody outside. This woman is freaking out. She's like in her low 70s. And I'm like, what's going on? What's going on with you? And she said, well, my husband's still in there. He couldn't walk down the stairs and the elevator was offline.
Gosh.
So she had to leave him in there. And so it's just those things of thinking, okay, what are these, my fact that I think I'm that important today that would offset me doing that to the people I love later. And so I know that's a pretty dark little thing, but it's kind of something I just think about is like, this is not important. You are, your health, your fitness, they're the most important thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think for a long time, people have felt so much of this in aging is inevitable. And I think that's also part of it, is to challenge that thinking, explain what we now know in terms of the science behind aging and how we support ourselves. And so for a long time, I think people have thought, well, it's inevitable. I've worked with clients who've talked to me about, well, even younger than me, talking about, well, I think I need to move into a bungalow. I don't know if you know what a bungalow is, a single story building. We've kind of got lots of them in the UK and lots of in like retirement villages, and people think they need to move into a bungalow because there's no stairs when they reach a certain age. And I'm like, this thought that we're all going to need a bungalow and then we're going to need a care home, and that's inevitable, and we're probably going to need a walking frame, and life isn't going to be so good, and all these things. It's just like we need to challenge that idea that that's an inevitability now, and recognize how we can influence our future aging trajectory. That's the most critical thing.
Yeah. Now, in the book, you went over, and I've read about the 11 components of fitness before, but I think it'd be valuable to kind of just go through them real quick, what each of them are, the 11 components, and why each one is particularly important to us as we get older.
Yeah. So I think, I'm going to refer to my book as well for a moment. So I think the reason I included these was because we are, as fitness professionals, we're very aware of these. But when people come to us and they talk about fitness, or we're talking about fitness, everyone has got a different idea of what fitness means. So the idea of including these 11 components of fitness was to say it's multifactorial when we look at fitness. So it's not just about cardiovascular fitness. It's not just strength and conditioning. And what about some of the skills? So we break these components down into the health-related components of fitness and the skill-related components, and kind of explain those in a bit more detail. So we know that the health-related components of fitness are body composition, so a cardiovascular fitness, flexibility, muscular endurance, and strength. So we can go into those in a bit more detail if you like, but I'm just going to sort of name them first of all for people. So those are I think most people would recognize, okay, that I understand a little bit about body composition and health and flexibility and why that might be important to health. But then we also think about the skill-related components of fitness. And these are things we might not be so aware of, but we'd be aware when they're not working. So things like agility, balance, coordination. Again, when we think of older people who might be struggling, these are some of the things we might be aware. Oh, he's not so agile now. We might see as a young child hopping and jumping around and log jumping and not having a problem, but we can see that these components might be harder. So agility, balance, coordination, power, the ability to generate power quickly. We'll see that in sports, for example, the ability to be able to accelerate, decelerate, control forces. So power, reaction time. Again, we might sort of see that in the sporting arena and understand that. But when we think about reaction time with someone older, we might be thinking about, if you trip, can you save yourself? Are your fast twitch muscle fibers good enough? Are they there? Have you still got them activated so you can save yourself? Because that's about reaction time. And finally, speed. So these are all the elements. So when in my book, what I talk about as these components of fitness, and therefore how we incorporate them into a training program so that we're maintaining all these elements of fitness, these components of fitness, to age as well as we can. And that's also recognizing some people are going to be more naturally athletic. They're going to tend more towards strength and cardiovascular fitness. Some people will find balance a bit more challenging. Or we've got, auditory changes, hearing, sight loss as we get older. These do affect things like balance and coordination, but it's how we work around that. So I think that's why it's important to keep an awareness of what those components are and how they relate to aging.
Yeah. Because, one of the big advice things out there, and it makes sense, and it's the right advice to start, but it's not the right advice to advance. And that is do something you enjoy.
Yep. Yep.
And so, I could sit there and say, well, I enjoy lifting weights. But if all I do is lift weights, well, I'm not working on my cardiovascular fitness. I'm not working on my balance and agility. And so, great, I'm strong, but I'm walking down the sidewalk and I see a bicycle coming at me, and I don't have the capacity to get out of the way of the bicycle, and trying to do so without having the balance. I fall, and I don't have the reaction time. So I land on my hip.
Yeah.
And now I'm not strength training anymore.
Yeah.
And so it's really a function of balance and making sure, by balance, I mean balance across all 11 of these components to make sure that you're building yourself up in a way that you are who you need to be. So you don't have to move into a 1-story little bungalow. You can live where you want to do what you want to do. And if you need to, you can go down the stairs when you need to.
Exactly. So it's thinking about all those things that allow us, because we're not one-dimensional at the end of the day, are we, as humans? We need our hearts to function well, but we need some strength as well. We also need flexibility, and we need the agility. And sometimes when I share stuff about this on my social media, whether I'm dancing or running or lifting weights or doing mobility or doing flexibility, and people say, well, it's so hard to do everything. And I say, I appreciate it looks overwhelming, but there are smart ways we can train where we're mobilizing through our workouts, where we're including strength and conditioning, where we're including cardiovascular. It is possible. And of course, that's where good program design comes in. And as opposed to randomly picking up workouts online and following a bit of this and following a bit of that. So as you say, it's really good. Do something you enjoy to start. I'd always say, what do you like doing? Because you're not going to get people to start with something they loathe and then start to layer on, okay, that's great. You love dance perhaps, but you layer on. Very often, I'm sure you get this as well, but when I really love Pilates and yoga, I think that's fabulous. Do I really have to do strength training as well? And I go, okay, so some of the really challenging moves with yoga, we've got the push-ups and whatever in that. But yes, if you really want to age better, then we need to incorporate all these elements.
Yeah. And you mentioned it in the book. It's kind of a common statement, is that we need to assess. So taking a moment to assess where you are across each of these fitness elements, these components, will give you an idea of things that you need to begin to incorporate in your training. And a lot of these are not significantly time intensive, a little bit of work in the morning for flexibility, or after your training, working on some flexibility, doing some balance work here and there, even kind of stacking it with other things like stand on one foot while you're brushing your teeth.
Exactly.
The next night, kind of thing. Go outside with a ball and toss it against a wall and practice catching it. So you're working on your coordination and reaction time. Things like that will go a long way towards allowing you to retain a full functioning body.
Exactly. And I think, when you're just saying that, I was sort of picturing children who don't have to think about these things in playtime. Well, if we can get them off the pads and all the rest of it and the mobile phones. But, traditionally, children haven't been needed to be told, you need to squeeze into a tight space and then you need to jump and explode and then you need to run in that direction. If you're playing catch or whatever, children are doing all these things naturally. If we look at how children move, that's our instinctively, we are designed to move like that, but we sit on chairs and we sit at desks and we sit on cars and we sit in trains and, we sit on a screen, and we've forgotten all these ways that we were designed to move as humans. And I love that idea that we need to be more playful as well. So when you're saying grab a ball, go outside, throw it against a wall, you don't have to be in a sport team to do that.
No. And a little rubber ball doesn't cost you that much. So it's not like
Exactly.
it's going to put you out to go buy a little rubber ball at the store or at Amazon and basically be able to go out there and just make a game of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I want to jump into osteopenia and sarcopenia because I think from an aging perspective, these have probably outsized impact on our overall fitness.
Mm.
Can you talk a little bit about both of them?
Yeah, so we know as we get older that we lose muscle mass. Unless we are working really hard to retain muscle, we have this natural drop off of muscle strength and power as we get older. We also have, so this can lead to sarcopenia, and that, if we think about, perhaps an easy way for people to understand that is when we think about frailty. If you think about a frail older woman or a frail older man, most people will immediately have an image in their mind. And what you're often looking at is someone who's lost muscle mass. And so they look more withered. And apart from the aesthetics, well, even nothing to do with the aesthetics, what that means is someone's losing the ability to move properly, to lift their leg up in order to climb upstairs, to climb into a bath or get in and out of a car, reach up into a cupboard, get in and out of a chair with ease, get out of bed. All these daily functional things become more problematic if we have sarcopenia. And we're all losing muscle as we get older, but what we're trying really hard to retain as much lean muscle as we can. And that doesn't happen by accident, unless we're challenging ourselves to lift weights, lift something that's heavier, to challenge our body, even body weight exercises, then we will lose more. And that ultimately can lead to sarcopenia, frailty, and a whole host of other issues, really. And of course, muscle isn't just about function, it's got lots of metabolic functions as well. So actually retaining muscle has multiple benefits. And then if we think about osteoporosis, osteopenia, we know that for women post-menopause, so osteoporosis affects men and women, but it affects far more women. And we know post-menopause, our bone mineral density decreases, and it quite rapidly during the first 5 years. There's some discussion and argument about how much is lost and how rapid that is. But if we don't do anything about it, we're going to lose bone mineral density. And that can lead to osteopenia, and ultimately it can lead to osteoporosis, which means we're more at risk of fracture. So we know that bones are like a honeycomb. If you cut a bone in half, that's what it looks like. But it just gets very holey. So it means you're much more likely to break a bone. And I mean, I had a wrist fracture myself a year ago, and I don't have osteoporosis or osteopenia. This was just a freak accident where I fell from height backwards. But, I'd never broken a bone up until that. But it's such a painful thing. It's such a long time of recovery as well. And I definitely don't want to break another bone. So for anyone who, as they're getting older, I'm saying, please do something to protect your bones. And that means weight-bearing exercise. It means explosive exercise, impact exercise, and strength training, and obviously supporting it with enough protein intake and so on and so on. Because those two things combined, sarcopenia and osteopenia, would really impact the quality of your life as you get older. But, the good thing is lots we can do about it. So whilst this is osteopenia and osteoporosis, very much linked to postmenopause. And I think the other thing to say on that, and I learned a lot more about this when I went through my own wrist fracture, you can strength train all your life like I have, and you could still be at risk of osteoporosis because there is a genetic link with it. So I don't think you can take for granted you've done everything you can in your power. It just means you are in a better place. So I was checked at the time. I don't have osteoporosis. So it's not absolutely foolproof, but if you're doing strength training, even if you've got that genetic link, you're going to be in a much better position than had you not done any strength training at all, because potentially you could be losing bone mineral density much quicker if you've got a genetic link, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And while I can't definitively say this, I imagine that your your fitness level, your strength level, and the training that you have done put you in a better position for that fall, that it wasn't worse than it
Oh, absolutely. That was
was.
exactly. I mean, when I fell, I think and it was right by a swimming pool as well. So it's a sheer drop into a swimming pool. And going through my mind was going like, I'm going to be knocked out. I'm going to be knocked unconscious. And this is all in like the split second that I fell, and I'm going to roll into the pool, and then I'm going to drown. I was actually totally catastrophizing. But also what was going through my mind is, could I break a hip? And I think, as I say, had I already had osteopenia, osteoporosis, I would definitely have broken more than my wrist. And I think the supporting structures, because I've trained all my life, I was in a better position, perhaps overall strength. And it also meant when it came to the recovery process and the rehabilitation process, I continued to train because I know how to. Obviously, I couldn't do anything with my fractured arm, but I continued to train my uninjured arm, the rest of my body, cardiovascular, strength. I did everything else to offset the muscle loss that is inevitable when you have a limb that's out of action, but also trying to retain as much fitness as possible. And so I think, that whole experience taught me that if you've already got compromised health and fitness, if you haven't done anything you can to support yourself, so an injury like that can be utterly devastating. And we talk about the spiral of physical decline. And when you see, and I'm sure many people listening to this will recognize this perhaps in relatives that have had one injury, one thing, and it's led to something else, and then it's led to something else, and it's led to something else, because we can rapidly lose health and fitness, and we can trigger. So had I already had underlying conditions, fractured my wrist, I stopped moving, cardiovascular fitness would have gone down, my strength and conditioning, my flexibility, my mobility, my mental health, all of those things can absolutely plummet with a silly accident like that. So it's kind of thinking about that. What can I do to protect myself as much as possible? Accidents will still happen, but what can we do to mitigate the risks of how devastating something like that could be?
Yes. Now I want to kind of skip a little bit to another topic you got into the book that I think is really, really important. Is after we exercise, a lot of people have the question. It's like, okay, should I do a protein shake? Should I do this? Should I do that? In the book, you make it so simple with what you call the 3 R's of post-exercise nutrition.
Mm.
Could you talk through those? Because I think this kind of answers the question of what your body needs after you've completed a good training session.
Yeah. So first of all, we need to think about rehydrating, because if you've been exercising, you may have probably lost water through sweating. So we immediately need to be thinking about hydrating water. Actually, we want to start off our session already well hydrated, and we want to be consuming water through the session if we're perspiring a lot, and we need to think about that afterwards. And, if we're in a very hot climate, or I've just come back from Greece, for example, so whilst I was training out there, I think you're very aware, if you're in a very hot climate, you know that you're probably drinking to thirst anyway, but very aware that when I was training out there, I was definitely sweating more than I would be in the UK, and recovery. And when we think about hydration as well, we want to be making sure, just to make it really clear for people, you want your urine to be very light and pale in colour. It doesn't have to be more complicated than that. If your urine is light and pale in colour, it's fairly odorless, that you're hydrating well. So that's the first thing we need to think about. Refueling. So a combination of carbohydrates with protein will help replenish your glycogen stores. So that can help with tissue repair as well. So we need to think about how we're refueling, what you're eating in terms of your carbohydrates with protein. Very often protein shake, for example, will be a helpful way to address quick protein requirements. Small protein snack to go with it might be necessary. It depends what time of day you're exercising as well. That's worth thinking about. And repair is about that protein. It's about making sure that you've got adequate protein intake to assist with the muscle repair and your growth. And that if we think about what you're consuming with protein, we want to make sure we're eating enough protein over the course of 24 hours. So not just that, there used to be this whole idea that you needed to get it in immediately after a workout. What's much more important is that we're hitting that protein intake over the course of a day. So yes, rehydrate, refuel, and then think about repair. And those
Yeah.
are the
I'm not going to say that the protein window was a myth, but we're not professional bodybuilders. So, that level of optimization that's going to give us 0.1% difference over the course of a training period isn't really going to make a huge difference for us. It is about making sure that you're getting adequate protein across the day. The amino acids will be there for the repair for the work that you're doing. And that's really what this is all about.
Absolutely.
Now, you went through something a few times that I hope I never experience, because I've had a client that went through it, and then listening to your stories about it, it sounds like one of the kind of the worst things that I could think of with regards to just as you get older. And I know women deal with it a little bit more than men, but could you talk about your incidence of frozen shoulder and what that was about and
Sure.
the choices you had to make?
So, as you said, frozen shoulder is actually called adhesive capsulitis. That's the medical term. And this is where, for no apparent reason, you'll suddenly find that your shoulder isn't moving as well. So what's happening is there's contraction in the shoulder capsule and the shoulder is no longer able to move as well. So very often it'll creep up on you. And for women, you'll suddenly think, well, I can't get my hand behind my back to hook my bra. And that's very often, you're thinking, or you go to put a jacket on or a cardigan and you can't get your arm back. So sometimes women takes a little while to go like, hang on, what's going on with my shoulder? Now we know that there's a strong link. The first time it happened to me, when I saw the consultant, he said it's called 50-year-old shoulder and we don't really know why it happens. And I went, well, is it linked to menopause then? And a few years ago, there was not as much conversation as there is now about menopause. Now, since then, we've had a lot more people working in this space and doctors and clinicians looking at the role of estrogen in our joints, how they can help add lubrication to joints, help joints move. And now, whilst we haven't got enough research on this, there's enough to say that there's a link with menopause for women, which is why more women than men suffer it. But it is a very painful condition. And women who've got it will know that you end up not being able to sleep. You wake yourself up when you have fallen asleep if you move side to side at all. And it really affects everything because it's stiff, it's painful, you can't put your clothes on and off easily, it's awful. For some people, for many people, it will resolve given a bit of time, given some physical therapy, some physiotherapy, keeping as mobile as you can. Unfortunately for me, it didn't. So I finally, having struggled on with this for quite some time and doing everything that I know as a trainer and working with a physiotherapist and even having tried a steroid injection, which can sometimes help, it was so bad. And when they did the x-rays and scans on me, they could see the scar tissue was so contracted that shoulder was never going to move again without an intervention. So I did have a shoulder surgery to release the capsule, which was successful for a few years, and then it stiffened up again. So I had to have the shoulder surgery repeated. Now, unfortunately, if you've experienced this on one shoulder, you're at greater risk of experiencing it in the other shoulder, which kind of makes sense in a way. If it's because of estrogen depletion in a woman post-menopause and you are sufficiently deficient, if you like, in one shoulder, you're probably going to be deficient in the other. It does kind of make sense, doesn't it, to me? So several years down the line, I had the same thing happen with the other shoulder, went through the whole rigmarole again, doing everything I could to keep it mobile, get it moving, physiotherapy, all the rest of it, steroid injection. Again, nothing worked, and eventually I ended up with surgery. Where that leaves me now is restrictions in both shoulders, not so much that I can't train, but definitely I think anyone who's had any joint surgery will probably be advised by an orthopedic surgeon that an operated on joint will never be like one that's never had surgery. So we kind of got to, and it's one of those things kind of got respect as we're getting older. There may be modifications, things we need to work around, but it doesn't mean we can't train. I still go into the gym. I still deadlift over 100 kilograms, but there are some things I know that would trigger more shoulder problems. So I have to tone that down, but it doesn't mean that's it. I can't train. I've got I've had a fractured wrist. I've had 3 shoulder surgeries. I've got a benign tumor in my spine. That's it. I can't train. No, it means we have to work around those things. And that is what I find is true for many adults as they're getting older. very lucky if we get to the age of 60, 70 and we've got no underlying problems at all. Fantastic if we have got to that age and we've got no underlying issues. But very often people will have osteoarthritis, they'll have had a joint issue, they'll had an injury at some point, they've fractured their ankle at some point. It's never quite been 100%, but we work around that.
Yeah, when I went into my surgeon, I tore my rotator cuff training.
Oh God!
For a Spartan Super, and so I tore my rotator. I was 51 years old.
Oh gosh!
And it was a complete tear, and I knew it was a complete tear the instant I did it.
Good.
And so when I went into him and everything, he's looking at my shoulder. He's like, "Yeah, that's tore." I'm like, "Yeah, it's tore." He said, "It's a complete tear." And I said, "Yeah, I know it's a complete tear." And so he does an X-ray, and he says, "Okay, yeah, it looks like it is damaged, and so I'm gonna go ahead and try to get you an MRI. We'll see if the insurance will pay it." And they did. They had really good insurance. So they agreed to pay it. And we do the MRI and he's like, "Yeah, it's tore." And so what was happening though, is all this time while I'm working up towards my surgery, because I know that's the only answer for a complete tear, I'm still training. I couldn't do any pushing movements, obviously.
No.
But I could do pulling movements.
Yep.
And so I was still pulling, which meant I was doing lat pull downs and deadlifts and rows and all of that kind of stuff. And so after I had the surgery and I went into the PT afterwards, the PT measured my shoulder and the capacity I had in it. And he says, "What have you been doing?" He said, "Because I've never even seen an athlete come in here and still have the range of motion that you have after going through a surgery." So when did you go through the surgery? I'm like, "Just last Thursday." This was Monday. So just Thursday. And he's like, "And you're moving that well." And I'm like, "Well, I'm not moving well, but," and he's like, what did you do?" I said, "I just kept training." And he's like, "You kept training?" And I'm like, "Yeah." I said, he said, "Most people would just put it in a sling and not do a thing and hope that it stopped hurting. And when it didn't, then they would go to the doctor and get the surgery. And that's weeks and months that they go without moving, and they lose all of that mobility." And I was like, "No, that wasn't me. I kept training and I did the Spartan with a torn rotator cuff." He's like, "Oh my goodness." But that was the point, is like, I was like, I can't untear it. I can't tear it more. I'm going to have this surgery. I still want to do the Spartan that I'm training for, and I'll just keep training. And I was able to do that. But again, just continuing the exercise, continuing the movement meant that my body didn't decay.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think this is so relevant for women. When I think about my wrist fracture, for example, I think lots of people, because they saw me using the cross education phenomena in order to train, so still lifting really heavy with my right uninjured side. And I think a lot of people were thinking, well, aren't you going to get really muscular on one side and you're going to be really uneven? I thought, gosh, if only it was that easy. But I was like, if you've got one flat tire, you don't go around and burst the others so they match. And for a woman, if you're not strength trained, if I hadn't done any strength training for 12 weeks whilst I couldn't use my injured side post-surgery and recovery, potentially I could be losing a lot of strength, but bone mineral density, sarcopenia, leaning towards sarcopenia, which is why the older we get, even more important that we work around what we've got. Obviously, follow the medical advice. There's no way I could have lifted anything. My arm was in a cast and I've got a plate in my arm and it was painful. There's no way I could do, but I could do lots of other things. And like you were saying, you're trying to avoid a rapid decline there.
Yeah.
And I think this is why it's so relevant as we get older. What we might have got away with.
And I had a trainer with me, because I had a strength trainer when I was going through all this.
Yeah.
And so I told him, I said, "I'm going to keep training." I said, "But there'll be things I won't be able to do.
Yeah.
But I want to work with you to do everything that I can."
Yeah.
So we tried pressing like on a Smith machine. We tried just doing decline presses, anything else. But there was no pressing at all.
Yeah, yeah.
And so we just realized as we did, it's like, I can't, no, that's not going to work. That's not going to, okay, no pressing movements, but I can do everything else. I didn't try to move the other side and do that, but I was at the point, 51 years old. I didn't feel like I was going to lose that much upper body musculature in the amount of time that I had. I was still doing the pulls. And so for me, it was really about moving through the range of motion, continuing to get stronger in the areas I could, and just knowing that I was still training. And the instant that I was able to go to PT, I was in PT.
Yeah.
And I got through that faster than I was supposed to. And, so as you get older, I think this stuff becomes more and more important, and you need to pay attention to it. If you don't know what you're doing, then find a good trainer that's worked with people like this. That was one of the advantages I had, was my strength coach had been the strength coach for the Division I football team, American football. My surgeon was the surgeon that they went to, and my PT was the PT that they went to. So every one of these folks worked with elite level athletes.
Yeah.
And my one answer to every one of them after I hurt myself was, I want to come back 100%. Okay, let's do that.
Yeah.
And so all of my training, all of my recovery, all that was built around full recovery, the idea of full recovery.
Yeah.
Now, I don't press what I was pressing before, because I think about it, functionally, I don't need to. So it doesn't make sense. Plus, just like with your frozen shoulder, my left shoulder probably has similar problems with the rotator cuff. If I overdo it, I could very well tear that one, and I'd rather not.
Exactly. So it becomes a fine line, doesn't it? We want to, we're challenging ourselves. We've still got goals we want to meet. We want to be as strong as we can. But we always know this in training anyway. It's always risk versus benefits.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to push for a 1 rep max week after week after week in my 60s. I know that it's not necessary. It's not ultimate. I'm not a power lifter. I'm not competing in a competition. I'm doing this. And if we're in it for the long run, then it's what is going to support longevity.
Yeah.
Because as you know, as I know, being injured absolutely sucks. And not being able to train. So I always am like, I'd rather avoid injury. So I'm not going to do something that is high risk and more likely to lead to injury.
Yeah.
So that's a fine balance sometimes. It's pushing ourselves, whatever we're doing, whether it's flexibility, whether it's cardiovascular, whether it's strength, but it's getting that balance right. And as you say, that's where a good trainer and their advice, or a physical therapist or whatever, is invaluable, because you want to keep on the right side of injury. Definitely as you get older, what we might have recovered from very quickly in our 20s and 30s is a whole different ball game in our 50s and 60s.
Very much so. So, Jacqueline, I define wellness as being the healthiest, fittest, and happiest you can be. What are 3 strategies or tactics to get and stay well?
Oh, goodness. Well, I didn't prepare anything for this. So what would I say? I think happiness and making peace with a lot of things is kind of key to that. But stay a bit hungry. Have a bit gritty. Go for things. Push yourself. Don't be hemmed in by limitations. Expect more. Be a bit expansive and dream a bit. That's way more than 3 words, but that's kind of where I'm going with that.
Yeah, no, I didn't say 3 words. I said 3 things, but
Okay.
and I agree with you. I think being gritty and wanting to try and experience life, that's where joy comes from. And if we have the health to live a long, good life and we are fit, we're able to do a lot more of those things.
Absolutely. And as you say, I've got 5 children. I want to be an absolute pain in the neck to them. I want to be around for a long time. I want them to say, what is mum up to next when I'm 90 and I'm on my bike, or I'm climbing something or whatever, or I'm getting on a plane. And I want to be, I've got grandchildren as well. I want to see my grandchildren married, if that's what they're going to do. I want to see them in their careers. I want to be around for a long time, but I don't want to be needing help. I want to be independent, and I want to be, I think we've just had a lady on the news here in the UK, 116. Every time you hear about an older adult and you go like, oh, I thought 100 was my goal. Actually, Oh, now you've just told me women are living to 116. So we need to know that we could be here for a long time. And if we're going to be here for a long time, we better be in a good body, in a body that's helping us live as full a life as we can.
And that's one of the wonderful things. The gift that we have is a body that can, if we do the right things for it, it will get better, it will heal, and it will give us a better life. We just have to do the right things.
Yeah, exactly.
Jacqueline, if people wanted to learn more about you, learn more about your book, Strong, where would you like for me to send them?
So they can find me on Instagram. I'm very active on social media. My account is Her Garden Gym. My book is available in all good bookshops and online stores as well. And you'll find it on Amazon. And yeah, I'd love, and if people listening to this do read my book and they like it, I would love to hear from them. Yeah.
It's a great book, and it puts together a full program. So this is not just education on what fitness and health mean. You really do go above and beyond in explaining various exercises, putting together programs. So this is pretty much, as we say, soup to nuts for someone who just wants to get started, wants to make sure they're doing the right things. This is going to give you all the information and guidance that you need to get started.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, that was very much the intention. I didn't want to dumb it down. We have a lot of sort of dumbed down speak in fitness, particularly towards women. I think, women are educated, they're knowledgeable, they can understand the science. So I wanted to explain what we're doing, why we're doing it, how we do it. But I also wanted people who've never felt they were engaged in fitness. It wasn't quite for them. Perhaps they've had poor experiences of sports teams or school and activities. And I wanted to say, it doesn't matter if you've never done it before. This is how you can approach it. This is how to warm up for exercise. And here are some programs that you can follow. And actually, here's a beginner's program and here's a more advanced program. And you don't need very much equipment. But I wanted people to have a starting point, because my philosophy is can we try and engage everybody in fitness? Because it shouldn't feel like exclusive. It shouldn't feel unattainable for people, because everyone, even we modify things. We can sit in a chair if we have lower extremity problems or mobility issues. So I very much wanted it to be accessible for people, so that, as you say, so everybody can join in.
Well, thank you, Jacqueline. And thank you for being a part of 40 Plus Fitness.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
If you enjoyed today's show, take a moment to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And if you would, please leave us a rating and review on your podcast player of choice. This really is important. It helps other people see what we're doing here, gets their attention, gets Apple and all the other podcast guys to start showing the show more to people that would be interested. So your ratings and reviews really do help. I read each one and I make adjustments based on what you give me, but really it helps promote the show. So if you enjoyed the show, please do leave us a rating and review. Next time on the 40 Plus Fitness podcast, we meet Dr. Michelle Jorgensen and discuss her book, Living Well with Dr. Michelle, a comprehensive handbook for optimal health and unlimited energy. Until then, have a happy and healthy week.